Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Claire had a way of winning people over. She was practical, straightforward, had a discreet laugh and a gaze that conveyed security. In the company's hallways, she was known for her dedication. Among friends, for her sense of responsibility, and at home, for being a wife who shared burdens and plans with Daniel. He always took pride in having her by his side. Stable accountant, reserved, meticulous with numbers and commitments. The two built a routine that to the eyes of those who saw it from the outside seemed solid. Coffee together in the mornings, plans for children with names chosen before pregnancy even happened. Trips saved for when things work out. They bet on time, patience, constancy. But something started slipping out of control when Gregory Holloway appeared at the company. He came from the UK, brought in for restructuring the American branches. Tall, polite, with an accent and presence that drew attention without effort. Married father of 5, he spoke to everyone in a friendly manner. But with Claire, something seemed different. At first, Daniel didn't mind. Comments about the new boss were common. Claire mentioned the meetings, the compliments she received, the way he made her feel recognized. "At least someone inside knows how much I do," she would say, half laughing, half venting. Daniel agreed, thought it was natural that she was noticed. He always thought she was good at what she did. The discomfort arose when Gregory began appearing more consistently in the conversations. Claire talked about him in moments unrelated to work. A comment here, a remark there. She changed her tone and Daniel noticed. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was just a phase. Too much professional involvement. But he started paying more attention. One day, while she was taking a shower, her phone vibrated with a message. "Dinner confirmed. Just us two. It'll be good to talk calmly." The name on the screen was Gregory. Daniel felt his heart race, but he took a deep breath. He trusted her. He wanted to believe that it had another explanation. Later, as she got dressed, he asked with forced casualness, "Where are you going?" Claire adjusted her earrings and answered without hesitation, "Dinner with Gregory. He wants to discuss a new project." She didn't try to hide it. Spoke as if it were just work. Daniel didn't mention the message he had read. He simply nodded and let it pass as if it were just another ordinary night. When she came back hours later, she said the dinner had been long but productive. He listened without interrupting. Deep down, he was waiting for her to be honest, but her look avoided his and her voice was lower than usual. In the following days, Daniel started noticing other small things. Claire started coming home later, distracted easily, smiling alone, reading messages on her phone. The marriage, which had once been a straight and firm line, began showing deviations. Intimacy disappeared little by little. The plans for children were left for later. The exchange of ideas turned into an exchange of silences. Until one Friday night, after a dinner where they barely spoke, he called her to sit down calmly. He said he was noticing everything. He said he missed the woman she had been for so many years. He asked without beating around the bush what was happening between her and Gregory. Claire didn't deny the involvement, but tried to minimize it. She said nothing had actually happened, that it was just admiration, that she needed attention. Daniel stayed silent for long seconds. Then he stood up and went to the bedroom. That night they slept in separate beds. For the first time in 8 years. In the following days, the atmosphere at home oscillated between discomfort and attempts to rebuild. She said she wanted to try again, admitted she had gone too far, said she still loved him. On the other hand, Daniel no longer had any certainty. He no longer looked at her the same way. Something had broken, and even though she begged, promises no longer held power. Still, they decided to take some time, try to recover. They went to the movies, had lunch out, talked more. For a moment, it seemed like things might go back to normal. But the sparkle in her eyes when talking about Gregory was still there, and that alone was a reminder that danger still lingered. What Daniel didn't know is that during that same period, the influence of Claire's colleagues was growing. Linda and Tina reinforced ideas that messed with her head. "You're still young. You deserve to be desired. A mistake doesn't define a marriage. If it's just once, who will know?" Claire listened to them all, and slowly she started considering what she would have never considered before. Gregory remained present, more intense, more involved, and she, fragile, torn between what she had built and what she wanted to feel again, started slipping. While Daniel was still trying to fix what was left, she was already 1 foot out the door. The days passed as if the routine tried to cover the crack that had grown between them. Claire continued with her commitments, now more involved in company matters, while Daniel kept his eyes open, observing more than speaking. He remained attentive to the details, schedules, glances, loose words. With each new action of hers, he felt trust sink a little more, as if he were in a boat with tiny cracks in the hull. But he pretended not to notice. He kept everything to himself without fanfare. Claire started smiling less at home and smiled more when her phone vibrated. Always busy, always with meetings, always with a new argument to justify the absence. And in the few moments they were together, Gregory's name came up frequently. Not as before, in the form of admiration, but now as a constant presence, a compliment, a story, a suggestion. Everything revolved around him. Daniel listened to it all in silence, measuring every word. When he questioned, she answered quickly with that defensive tone of someone who wanted to end the conversation before it really started. At the company, the climate had also changed. Claire had gotten even closer to 2 colleagues, Linda and Tina, both single, experienced, with strong opinions on relationships. Between lunches and coffee breaks, the conversations became bolder. Linda often said monogamy was a social prison. Tina believed every woman should take advantage of the time when she still attracted attention. "After 40, you'll regret not living this now," she repeated. Claire laughed, sometimes disagreed, but gradually those ideas gained space within her. What had started as a joke became a suggestion, and from the suggestion a plan was born. The idea came up casually during an afternoon when Tina commented on the annual company dinner. A traditional event where employees gathered to celebrate the year's goals and achievements. "It's the perfect opportunity for you and Gregory to be alone with everyone distracted," she said. Linda added, "Tell Daniel you need to help someone who's feeling unwell and done." Claire listened in silence, then let out a muffled laugh as if refusing to take it seriously. But in the following days, she started considering it more carefully. She thought about the adrenaline, the desire, the chance to feel special. It was a risk, but she had already allowed herself too much emotionally. The line between imagination and action was getting thinner and thinner. Meanwhile, Daniel had already started piecing the puzzle together more carefully. After the dinner with Gregory, he became more vigilant. He waited for her to leave to discreetly search her computer. One afternoon, he found archived messages and drafts as if she were testing phrases or hiding conversations. He read excerpts that mentioned meetings, expectations, compliments. Gregory was direct. "It will be the best night of the year," he said in one of the messages. In another, he mentioned the number of a hotel room already booked. Daniel froze inside. That wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was fact. He made copies, saved everything onto an external hard drive and stood there in front of the screen, feeling the ground giving way slowly. It was as if someone had pushed his life off a cliff and he was just watching the fall. But even with his stomach churning, he thought coldly. Going to her and exploding would be useless. It was time to prepare. He picked up the phone and called his Uncle Frank, who had been a police detective for 30 years. He explained everything in detail, listened to advice. Frank was direct. "If you want to do this right, we'll do it right." A few days later, Mark and Jason, childhood friends and Army veterans, were sitting in Daniel's living room as the plan was being drawn up. They didn't want trouble, but clarity. The truth exposed in the clearest and most devastating way possible. The company dinner was the perfect opportunity, and everything indicated she would use that moment to consummate what had been planned for months. The idea was to follow Claire discreetly, document everything, enter the room before them, and surprise the two. Daniel didn't want to hit, shout, or seek cheap revenge. He wanted to show the truth. He wanted her to look into his eyes and understand what she had destroyed. He wanted Gregory to see who he was facing. And more than anything, he wanted her to know that he knew for a long time. In the days leading up to the event, Claire seemed excited. She talked about the new dress, the chosen menu, the CEO's speech, but she avoided touching on the subject with Daniel. When he asked something about the logistics, she deflected, said it wasn't settled yet. But on her phone, the conversations with Linda and Tina were boiling. Details of the excuse, the exact moment to help the friend leave discreetly, the estimated time to return. It was all planned. She was preparing for what she believed to be a night of adventure. While Daniel was preparing to end a story, there was nothing left to save there, only truths to be exposed and a whole life to be rebuilt after the impact. The Northwave annual dinner was the kind of event where employees could bring their spouses. It was a way to reinforce the family image the company liked to convey. An elegant hall, ambient music, brief speeches from the directors and toasts to the future. Daniel had attended other editions beside Claire, and he had always been well received by her colleagues. This year, he confirmed attendance earlier than usual. He had a reason. He knew that behind all the formality of the event, something bigger was being orchestrated. That was where she would put into practice the plan that had been brewing for weeks. That night, Claire dressed carefully, as she always did. The chosen dress was elegant, the hair well-groomed, the perfume subtle. Daniel watched her, saying little. He was calm on the outside, but inside every second seemed part of a countdown. When they arrived at the venue, they smiled, greeted acquaintances, and for a while, everything ran as if they were just another couple attending the special company night. Light conversations, some comments about recent projects, and exchanged glances that seemed rehearsed. Claire played her role well, but Daniel noticed the signs, the glances toward Gregory, the frequent checking of her phone, the contained restlessness. At a certain moment, Tina approached with a tense expression and whispered something in Claire's ear. It was the beginning of the act. Claire turned to Daniel and said with a worried expression, "Tina isn't feeling well. I think it was something she ate. I'm going to take her to the hospital." He asked if he wanted to come along. She declined with practiced ease. "No need. It should be quick, but it might take a while." He nodded in agreement. She got up with her friend and left. The role was being executed exactly as they had planned. And that was exactly what Daniel was expecting. As soon as she passed through the door, he rose discreetly, left the side of the hall, and entered the car. He already knew the name of the hotel, the floor, the room number. He had already been there the previous afternoon with Frank, checking the surroundings, the accesses, and the observation points. That was the final part of the plan. On the way, he sent a message to Mark and Jason, informing them she had left. They were already positioned near the hotel, ready to enter with him at the right moment. Everything was timed. They were already positioned outside the hotel about 20 minutes before the scheduled time. Frank and Jason were in the car with the camera prepared, observing every move. The receptionist had already been instructed. The previous day, Daniel had offered her a good amount of money, and she not only accepted, but handed over the spare key to the room. The couple entered the hotel and, as expected, went straight up. The curtain of the room was open, and it was possible to see them entering. After a few minutes, the light went out. Daniel looked at his watch and waited. 10 minutes was the exact time they had decided to give, enough to leave no doubts about the intention of the meeting. In silence, the three men got out of the car, crossed the lobby, and went to the elevator. The receptionist saw them, gave a slight nod in confirmation, but stayed at the counter. When they reached the floor, they walked directly to the room. Daniel took the spare key from his pocket and turned it firmly. The door opened slowly. The scene that unfolded before them was exactly what they had imagined and worse. Claire and Gregory were lying on the bed, completely naked, wrapped in an affectionate embrace, as if the world was outside and nothing else mattered. The initial shock of the two was instantaneous. Claire screamed, trying to pull the sheet to cover her body. Gregory tried to get up in a rush, put on his pants, but before he could even put on his shirt, the camera was already on, capturing everything clearly. The three men entered firmly. Daniel didn't speak immediately. He recorded. He wanted every second of that moment to be documented. Gregory managed to put on his pants in a hurry and tried to run toward the door, but Frank and Jason grabbed his arm. He panicked, his eyes wide, his voice trembling, stammering disconnected sentences. When he realized he couldn't escape, he started begging. And then, in front of everyone, he lost control of his own body. He peed in his pants, crying, breathing fast, repeating, "Please let me go." Like a lost child. Jason moved his arm away from him and kept filming. The man who thought he was in control of everything was now doubled over in fear, begging for dignity. Meanwhile, Claire, wrapped in the sheet, tried to cover her face. She screamed, cried, begged them to stop. She said it was all a mistake, that she didn't know how it had gotten to that point. Daniel looked at her without saying anything. It was as if everything he needed to see was right there in front of him without space for explanations. Shame filled every corner of the room. Her tears and Gregory's desperation only showed the extent of the fall they were experiencing. It was then that the receptionist appeared in the doorway, panting and nervous. "Look, the manager has already called the police. You better leave now before it falls on me." Frank thanked her and signaled to the others. Daniel looked at Claire one last time, but didn't say a word. He simply turned off the camera and put the device away. They left in silence. Claire remained in the room, still crying with her knees bent and the sheet stuck to her body. Gregory stayed with his back turned, trying to clean his pants with his hands in vain. And that was how that night ended. The end of a marriage, of a farce, and of any image she once thought she could sustain. Daniel descended the elevator with the same calm he had maintained throughout the entire plan. Downstairs outside, he thanked his friends with a silent handshake. Frank handed him the flash drive with the complete recording. Mark and Jason said goodbye with a knowing glance without needing to say anything. They knew they had done the right thing. Daniel took a deep breath, adjusted his coat, and re-entered the event hall where the party was still ongoing as if nothing had happened. Claire's absence hadn't been noticed by many. The low lights, the smiles, the toasts, everything continued as if the night was still just beginning. With the flash drive in his pocket, Daniel approached the technician responsible for sound and visuals at the event. He pulled him aside and said he wanted to display a surprise for everyone present, something special that would make that night unforgettable. The technician, believing it was a tribute or a fun institutional video, accepted immediately. A few minutes later, the big screen lit up. Conversations dropped. Cutlery stopped. Everyone turned their eyes to the screen. The first image was of a hotel room with the camera focused on the bed. The hall fell completely silent when they recognized without room for doubt Claire and Gregory naked laughing. The image then advanced, showing the moment the three men burst into the room. The sound was clear. The embarrassment impossible to describe. The sequence showed Gregory desperate, trying to run, being held by the firm arms of the veterans. And in the scene that caused a mix of shock and disbelief, the executive urinating in his own pants and falling into tears like a helpless child. The hall, taken by murmurs, was divided between people covering their mouths with their hands, others nervously laughing, some completely paralyzed. The president of the company, seated at the central table, paled and immediately stood up, ordering that the video be taken off the air. Daniel had already removed the flash drive from the equipment, but the damage was done. Several guests had filmed the screen with their own phones. Within minutes, the video began circulating in internal groups at the company, and from there it went to social media. It was impossible to contain. The image of Gregory, the British executive with refined speech, crying and out of control of his own functions, spread like wildfire. His reputation, built over years across 2 continents, crumbled within hours. The days passed, and Gregory's wife, upon receiving the video anonymously, first thought it was some kind of malicious edit. But upon watching it until the end and seeing clearly his face completely exposed and in an embarrassing situation, she felt the world collapse. The recording left little doubt. The infidelity was there, explicit, captured in a perfect angle with clear audio, sufficient lighting, and the aggravating detail of him begging, crying, and urinating in his pants in front of other men. For a woman who had dedicated more than 20 years of marriage to Gregory, raising 5 children almost alone while he traveled the world under the excuse of work, that was a profound blow, more than public. It was humiliating. Without wasting time, she contacted her lawyers, demanding the lawsuit be filed with maximum urgency. The professionals, upon seeing the content and understanding the context, were shocked. It was rare to find such conclusive evidence, so devastating with immediate repercussions on social media and internal company channels. She requested a multi-million-dollar compensation for moral damages, psychological trauma of the children, proven infidelity, public exposure of the family in a global scandal, and finally for the destruction of her image as a wife. The amount seemed absurd even by the standards of major executives, but she succeeded. The judge in charge of the case didn't hesitate to consider the situation as extremely serious. The video shown in court in a closed session caused discomfort even among those present in the courtroom. It was a scandal difficult to compare. Gregory, who used to give interviews in business magazines about corporate ethics and inspiring leadership, saw his image reduced to a humiliating meme. He was fired from Northwave without any public statement. HR simply updated internally that he no longer worked for the company. The position of executive vice president was temporarily assumed by another member of the board. He lost all bonuses, termination benefits, stock options, and started living in hiding away from social media and the press. He tried to defend himself, saying he was the victim of a setup, but no one believed him. The scene of him urinating and crying in front of the camera had already gone viral in private business groups, forums, and even messaging apps. The reputation he had built over decades was destroyed in less than 2 minutes. Claire was also called by the management 2 days later. The meeting was short, objective, with no room for appeals. She received a notice of dismissal for inappropriate conduct, breach of institutional trust, and damage to the company's image. She left the room with a box in her hands and the certainty that she would never occupy any prestigious position in that sector again. She tried to appeal, sought lawyers, but they all advised silence. Her name had become synonymous with betrayal, scandal, and shame within Northwave. No company of the same size would hire her after that. Her friends Linda and Tina panicked. They knew they were involved in the plan and that in some way they contributed to the tragic outcome. They started avoiding conversations, deleted old photos with Claire from social media, distanced themselves from each other, and avoided any comment about what happened. They were called in for internal clarifications, but managed to keep their jobs. Still, their presence caused discomfort in the corridors. Some meetings started being held without them. Invitations were withdrawn. Side conversations became frequent. They were no longer seen as reliable professionals. They carried the stigma of having supported a colleague who destroyed her career and that of one of the company's main executives. Daniel, in the middle of all this, remained firm. The very next day after the scandal, he submitted the divorce request. He brought all the evidence to the court, screenshots, images, videos, and even written testimonies. The judge reviewed everything in a single hearing and made an almost immediate favorable decision. Daniel kept the house, the car, accounts untouched, and all assets preserved. He didn't have to pay alimony nor divide the property. Claire lost everything she had built alongside him. And more than the assets, she lost any argument she could use to try to soften her guilt. She found herself alone without allies, with a tarnished name and her life crumbling bit by bit. The video still circulates to this day in closed forums, being used as an example in corporate ethics lectures, even though unofficially. Gregory's expressions, Claire's desperate face, the screams, the chaos, all of it remains etched in the collective memory of those who watched. It has become a topic of discussion in universities, inspiration for anonymous articles, and even conspiracy theories about internal leaks. But for Daniel, that recording has ceased to be a symbol of pain. It now represents the moment he regained his peace, ended a cycle of lies, and started a new life with dignity. He moved on with his life without needing to look back. Claire, on the other hand, found herself surrounded only by the consequences of her own decisions, without anyone to share the burden nor to hold her when the ground disappeared. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.